Hamilton wrote, the other 51. How do you ride like you're running out of time? Right day and night like you're running out of time. Every day you fight like you're running out of time. Like you're running out of time, or you're running out of time. How do you ride like tomorrow won't arrive? How do you ride like you needed to survive? How do you ride every second you're alive? Every second you're alive, every second you're alive.
Matt Cerrone, welcome to the Other 51. Thanks for joining me today.
Absolutely. It's great to be here, Brian. I really I enjoy the show, and I'm glad to actually talk about something other. We could talk a little Mets, but I'm glad to talk about something other than the New York Mets.
Well, is there something going wrong with the Mets season this year? I hadn't heard.
If you're a baseball fan, and I would assume if you're listening to this, hopefully you follow it. The Mets have been decimated with injuries this year. It's been something like I've never seen before. I mean, I've covered years with them where I thought it was really bad. This blows that out of the water. Like I've never seen anything like it in terms of the caliber of players they've lost, and it's just completely derailed the season and sent what was shockingly optimistic and fairly hopeful Mets fans into complete tailspin and turmoil right back to where we began. So it's been rough. It's been a rough year, to say the least. I can't wait for it to be over, frankly.
It's crazy when you think that this team was in the World Series just 2 years ago and kind of had really high hopes coming in. And so I'm wondering what that's like kind of from a fan perspective and someone who writes about the team and covers it. Baseball is unique in that when you have a bad season, like it lingers, like it just keeps going. It's not like I know you're a Jets fan and I'm a Bills fan, so we're going to have bad years. But in football, it's kind of like it's one and done a week. You kind of deal with it. But baseball, it's 6 months, and the Mets kind of got hit early with the injury. So what's that been like from both a writer and a fan perspective to try to follow this team throughout a year like this?
Yeah, well, I think it depends on a few things, but for me, I can only speak for me personally, and this would be advice for anybody else too. And I think this comes down to this sort of idea of finding your voice and kind of knowing why you do what you do. Mm-hmm. For me, as far back as I can remember, I've always enjoyed the story of the season, sort of the narrative that plays out, and maybe that's the writer or the storyteller or whatever baked in. But like I've always just sort of watched sports in general that way, baseball in particular, because it's day in, day out. And frankly, it's year round with the way they structure all of the off-field events on top of it. So, I mean, it really never ends. And, the way it begins, there's this preamble to the season, and then you get to spring training, and there's this whole, beauty and passion and casualness and very calm, hopeful optimism that begins really any kind of, romantic sort of story. And then the season starts and it's battle, and it goes, and there's all kinds of things that happen along the way, some good, some bad, hopefully more good than bad, but sometimes that isn't the case. And even that in and of itself is a story. It's a way to watch how these people deal with it and how they recover, how the fans deal with it, how the media covers it. All these parts and pieces tell really a unique story about 2017 or 2009 or whatever it might be. And like, to me, that's how I've always watched the game. I see it not like it's a movie, but kind of like it's reality TV in a way. Mm-hmm. That's unscripted. And like, that's, I think for me as a writer helps sustain it because, winning and losing is awesome. And as a fan, that's important. But there's always something sort of, there's an angle, there's a direction, there's an end to this, whether it's the season or the era of this front office or certain players. So like there's always that sort of beginning, middle, and end that for me is always sort of engaging and, like I said, sustaining.
And it's fulfilling to do as a writer or as somebody who covers a team or follows a team to kind of find those stories and kind of find the human element, and that's a cliche, but kind of find that idea of, this team's kind of slogging through an injury-riddled season, and it's kind of, the wins and loss mentality be like, oh, it's kind of a wasted year for the Mets. But when you kind of open yourself up to that idea of finding the stories within the team or finding the stories around the team, there's really no such thing as that wasted year. Like and sometimes these years can yield the most interesting stories. Like a losing clubhouse can a lot of times be a lot more interesting to cover and write about than a winning clubhouse.
That's true. They're certainly more dramatic. I mean, that's
right.
For certain. And I think the other thing you get with the losing team is there's always, baseball, sports in general, it's always, for the most part, I mean, outside of maybe a handful of teams, for the most part, you're always sort of looking to next year, looking to what's next. Mm-hmm. And even if a team's winning, you're, at this point starting to think about the playoffs or think about, and you're writing about that stuff, and there's that level of momentum that you sort of cover and write about and think about. And when the team's not playing well, you can always sort of start to turn the page a little bit and look towards next year and the off season and what they're going to do. And so there's always things to sort of string along and keep yourself kind of tied into it and keep readers, tied into it. So from that perspective, there sort of has this aspect that you can kind of cling to. But yeah, I mean, the stories themselves are always a little bit more hectic, a little bit more dramatic, a little more, negative, but that's not necessarily the worst thing because it allows the opportunity to flex that muscle and be a little bit more critical. And, so I think it's just about knowing yourself to put it back in the context of the podcast, like knowing yourself as a writer and knowing your strengths and weaknesses and the things that you really enjoy and the way you enjoy doing things and why you enjoy doing them and just sort of putting that in the context of the moment, mm-hmm. I like, I talk more critical than I write. And part of that is just, it's patience. It's just the way I operate. And I do write quickly, but I'm far more emotional when I'm on a podcast with somebody talking about the Mets and you ask me a question, I'm far more likely to get crazy about it. Where on the site and when I'm writing, I'm going to take my time. But when things are going badly, you tend to get a little bit more angry and a little bit more emotional. And so sometimes It's kind of nice to just kind of let that flow and tap into and let it resonate with the audience a little bit. I don't think I probably do that enough. And so these are opportunities to do that a little bit, and flex that muscle, which is nice.
I wanted to ask that about kind of balancing that, especially, given your work with MetsBlog and with SNY and kind of being like a very fan-centric site and a fan-oriented site and kind of balancing that desire that you have to tell good stories and to find the interesting stories going on with this team and kind of balancing it out with the audience's, I don't know if expectation is the right word, but wanting to vent or kind of like frustration with the season or something like that. So how do you kind of balance those, do you find you have to balance? Are they kind of in opposition with each other or not?
Yeah, I used to think it was. And then somewhere around the time I started putting my name on the site, which was probably like 05, 06, which would have been right before SNY launched and a couple years before I even partnered with them. But it was a little bit before that where I realized that the better approach wasn't necessarily to consider myself writing for an audience, but really just to be writing for one person.
Okay.
And so I still write the site very much like that. I don't think of it in terms of, 30,000 people reading. I think of it in terms of just one person at their laptop or on their phone or whatever it is these days. And, they're not necessarily coming to the site to be convinced or argue or anything like that. I think I've come to learn, and maybe this is just through 15 years of doing this, that really what they're coming for is more of a calibration. Okay. They've got an opinion. They think the move that was made was either stupid or amazing. And I think what I provide is sort of a touch point, a little bit of context and a touch point, a consistent sort of middle ground that they can say, wow, he thinks that's crazy. Or he thinks this, I think that, oh, I'm right. Or we're the same. It just sort of adds, I think I provide sort of this sort of swing point, and it's less about convincing people. And so it makes it easier to write it that way because really it just flows more naturally. I just put my opinion, and if it's emotional and angry or emotional and ecstatic or maybe even a little bit overboard in terms of being excited about something, or it's completely negative and angry, it doesn't really make a difference if the majority agree with me or not. And I don't really care if they do or not. It's more about you've developed this relationship with me, I've developed this relationship with you. And as long as you're reading it and it provides some sort of value to you, whether it's because you want to know what I think or because it helps you sort of validate or clarify your own thoughts, great, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. Just keep reading, and as long as you enjoy it and I enjoy it, that's that's at the end of the day all that makes a difference. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, and it oddly seems kind of antithetical to a lot of, I think, the instinct in digital media, and Lord knows newspapers have had this problem too. You're chasing traffic, you're chasing what you think the audience wants or what the audience expects you to put out, and I think there's a certain amount of this is lower C courage involved in knowing yourself as a writer, as a storyteller, and knowing what to do, and kind of trusting that the audience is going to respond and come to you, and that you don't have to kind of be the Mets are a disaster to get clicks or whatever, or kind of feed into that. Do you remember, you said it was around maybe 2005 when you started kind of writing that way and writing to one person. Was there one story or one kind of breaking point for you, an aha moment with that?
Yeah, not for me in the moment. I think it was more watching the way the medium had been evolving outside of sports, quite frankly. I'm a political junkie, still am. That to me is the ultimate sport. So, I still follow everything insanely closely, political media. I love debate framing and language and communications and all that kind of stuff. So I always paid attention to that when I was developing MetsBlog. My background was in media relations to a certain extent. And so, that was always something I was aware of, and watching a lot of the political blogs, and seeing how their personalities, whether it was, Instapundit or Wonkette or, Andrew Sullivan or, the Daily Kos or, Glenn Reynolds, a lot of these guys were sort of, they were putting themselves out there. It wasn't the website name or trying to be this other entity. They were sort of positioning themselves as, and the term back then was the navigator, the person that sort of helped lead you through the woods, that helped kind of get you from point A to point B in this really cluttered informational world, and developing that relationship with them, getting to, have a little bit of a crush on Anna Marie Cox and really admiring, what Glenn Reynolds was doing and the way his brain was thinking, and starting to, see these writers as people and personalities and wanting to know what they think. I think that sort of crystallized for me that it was important to put my name on the top of the site, put my face on it, and really take ownership of what I was saying, because hopefully people reading, and at that point numbers were going up, would develop that relationship with me and sort of value me, not just the words on the page or the way it looked or access or whatever else it is, but actually want to be friends with me in a sense through the computer. And I think it's through that branding and that connection that you develop, obviously, loyalty and long distance and sustainability. And I think that's something, you're right, that a lot of the newspapers in particular, but a lot of media outlets struggle with, because they're not individuals. Mm-hmm. They are large brands, and they're worried about how their talent is valued and whether they're going to leave for a different job. It's a different business model, but the individual can look at it that way. And I think that's sometimes where the clash between how journalists operate on social media versus how they operate for their outlet and all that. It's complicated. It's not easy, but it is easier when it's just you.
Right. And you mentioned the site around 2005. That's when I kind of got to know you a little bit when I moved to Binghamton and took the job. I was covering the AA Mets. And, your site was invaluable. I've told you this before, but your site was invaluable to me. As I think you call it a Grand Central Station for Mets news, and yeah. It's a great analogy, because it's perfect. It was like the one-stop place where in the morning I could go, and back then there were like 10 beat writers covering the team. I'm sure there are much fewer now, like 10 or 11, and so instead of having to go to 11 newspaper sites and sort through the sports section and read it, all the important news was right there, and it was just huge to be able to both catch up as I was new on the beat and to keep up, as the day, as I stayed on the beat with what was happening in the big leagues and kind of and everything on that. I'm wondering, from your perspective, you've been doing this for a long time, you said, and you kind of started the blog, it kind of took off in the mid-2000s. How have you seen blogging as kind of an entity and as a thing change? How is it different now than it was when you started?
It isn't. And I think what has changed is what people expect of it. So the medium itself is still the same. It's just, it's a log, it's a journal, and how you utilize that, is obviously up to the individual. But I think the expectations of people when they start a blog or they go to do it or, whatever it is, I think that has adjusted. I think there's an expectation that things are going to take off quickly and that, things can go viral and you can monetize and all these buzzwords and things. And I think as bigger, larger media outlets have sort of adopted the platform or in some cases abandoned it for social media or for more video podcasts, I think that has sort of altered its utility. But at the end of the day, like the relationship between the writer or between the blogger and the keyboard and, what is happening on the page, really, that hasn't changed. So I think, and it's funny because I think it's sort of coming back around a little bit. I sense there's a little bit more, I think there's becoming, and I think people are starting to understand that, the page view is kind of meaningless. And, there are these things that sort of that sort of shifted the industry a few years ago and now no longer are valued as much. And there are different opportunities available to people or larger opportunities available to people with less. And I think that has sort of brought a return to the individual wanting their own brand again and wanting their own voice and having their own place to sort of put stuff. And with that has come a little bit of a return to, I'm just going to write, and if people read it, great. If they don't, no big deal. But I just want to be able to put this here, whether it's on Medium or on your own site, WordPress or whatever. So it's weird how it ebbs and flows. Podcasting went through this too. 10 years ago, everybody podcasted, then nobody did. Now everybody does again. It's like I don't know what technology, demand, whatever it might be. But things change, and I feel like that's sort of the way blogging has kind of ebbed and flowed.
And so, how did you start your blog? How did the idea for MetsBlog come about?
Yeah, I will try to keep this brief. I know that's very difficult, but you're talking about a long time ago. Like I said, I was into political stuff, and I lived down in D.C. around 2001. I think my wife and I moved down there, and it was not long after that a lot of the Iraq War blogs and things like that started to pop up as that took over the news cycle. And I was in journalism school at University of Maryland, and I was taking a digital media class, and they charged us with, picking a new media. And so, I went with blogging, and I didn't want to do politics because, I wasn't confident in my opinions and in my knowledge base and what have you. So, but I was an out-of-market Mets fan, and I was a huge fan of Brian Hoke, who I'm sure you have met or know. He had a Mets site in the late 90s that got shut down by the team, and then he ultimately went to work for MLB.com, where he still is, subsequently covering the Yankees, but no hard feelings towards him. But Brian's an awesome guy, and he, I kind of modeled the blog after what he was doing with a site he was doing for the Star Ledger at the time. So, I just kind of went with it, and it was just text on a page because they weren't grading us on. It was really just learn about the medium. It wasn't even so much about like the product. Because again, I don't think people were thinking that way necessarily. So, I just did it, was writing, and it was fun, way to keep in touch. And it was literally just HTML on a web page. Like there was nothing, because I didn't know jack about coding or anything. So it just kind of went. And then the class ended, and apparently because I was hosting it on Yahoo GeoCities at the time, some people found it and they were reading it. And I was stunned by the fact that I was getting emails from people, and I was like, okay, even if it's 20 people, that's cool. So I just kept doing it, and more kept reading it. And I bought the domain name MetsBlog. I almost bought MetsWeblog.com. Thank God I did, because that's what you call them then. So not long after that, a person who became a very good friend of mine, John Keegan, this guy was launching a blog hosting company, which at the time didn't really exist. And a self-hosted kind of WordPress thing. I didn't know what that meant. He took me under his wing. He was a big Mets fan, liked what I was doing, saw a lot of potential, and helped turn it into what we would know as a blog. URL links, comments, a certain structure, helped me design it. And through that, I learned it, and learned coding and learned HTML and CSS and all these things. As the writing evolved, so did the back end. And, that was really it. And then from there, it really started to grow. And I threw myself into it. I was spending more time on that than school or the part-time job I had. I started using student loans to just sort of, keep myself at home to be able to write. Consider that a small business loan, I guess. And the rest is history.
So what's your day-to-day process for writing it? Because you're still updating it, you're still working on it. So what's the writing process for your blog look like? Yeah,
so it's changed a lot, especially as I have two children now. I have a 6 and a 4-year-old and a wife and a mortgage and all these other things. So it's the expectations and the time available is a lot different. Plus, I'm trying to launch a sports marketing company at the same time, so it's a lot happening. But so I get up at 5 a.m., 4:30, 5 o'clock. Thankfully, SNY has a news desk that puts some stuff together in the evening. So when I come in, I can just kind of help fill that in, and then I start looking for what happened during the game. I don't watch the games very much because I go to bed early, and so I'll watch the fast cast in the morning. See what happened, look at the box scores, and just kind of get a sense of that, and then I'll start offering in some reaction and putting some things together. But my goal is to have during the season the bulk of my opinion and the bulk of what we're going to work on done by like 10 o'clock.
Okay.
So that I can then focus on, we have an editorial meeting that I call into every day at 10 o'clock at SNY. And then after that, I kind of just sort of float doing my other stuff, the other things that I'm trying to work on, and just keep an eye on the news cycle. We use Slack to communicate between myself and the SNY news desk, the digital desk, and we'll just update things throughout the day as needed, pregame, obviously, and then it just repeats itself the next day. It's the off season that is far more complicated because it's so unpredictable and there's no games to work off of. So at any minute, anything can happen. And so that gets a little bit more, chaotic, a little crazy. But during the season, it's pretty rhythmic.
Gotcha. And I forgot to congratulate you at the start because you wrote a book and published a book.
Yeah, I did. I know. It was. I put it off for a long time. I got offers through the years, but nothing clicked. And this, I guess the publisher Triumph is doing a series of books for all teams in all different sports, where it was like essentially a bucket list, and they were short little mini essays on, all these different experiences that every fan of that particular team should experience. And while that didn't seem all that interesting to me, what I liked was that it was short stint writing, which I'm used to. Okay. It was stuff that I don't typically write about. Like I spend my days writing about news and rumors and, games and things like that. And so this was stuff that I've experienced, but never really had a chance to write about because it doesn't really fit into the news cycle. So that was cool. And then when the book started to evolve, it kind of turned into this quilt of Mets fandom, like all the things that kind of go into what make us crazy and passionate and, I think the most at least passionate fan base in sports, potentially the craziest.
You guys are up there. I can tell you, yeah.
So look, they put us through a lot. So and there's a lot to experience, from the good and the bad. So to get a chance to write about all that stuff that I wouldn't typically get to touch on was pretty cool. And so I just went about it that way. They packaged it how they did, but for me, it was 44 little essays on, everything from culture to music to food to actual games to things I experienced, interviews I've done. It's really just the Mets fan experience. And if people are interested in it, it's MatthewCerrone.com/MetsBook. You can get it there. It goes to Amazon and everything. But yeah, it's called the Mets Fans Bucket List. And every team put one out. So if you're a fan of the Yankees, John Feinstein did that one, I think. And the Red Sox, Pete Abraham. And, every team, I think, put one out. And it was pretty cool. I'm the only beat writer. I'm the only fan of a team that they allowed to write it. And I think they had concerns. But I tried to explain to them. I've for 15 years been sort of sitting at this point between fan, team, media, all these things. And I know how to kind of play it straight, and I've got a lot of experiences from being around the team, and I've also watched the bulk of the games from the stands and from my couch, and so I think it made a good fit.
Can you talk about that nexus a little bit, that kind of idea of fan, team, media, and for the longest time, one of the kind of precepts of sports journalism especially is kind of the fan and the reporter is very separate, and there's good reasons for that, and there's some problems with that. it's not a black-white thing. But kind of talk about what's that like for you to kind of navigate that fan team media nexus point, and maybe how it's changed a little bit with digital media.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, for me personally, I've never really concerned myself with journalistic integrity. And I know that sounds really bad, but like when I say that, I mean, my main goal isn't necessarily the truth. My main goal is to have to know as much as I can and be a fan of the team and watch them win and hope people enjoy what I write. And that's about it. Like, I don't, I'm not too concerned with, like I know some of the beat writers that I'm friends with, like for them, the goal really is what's going on. Why is this happening? Why did this take place? Why? And all that stuff is important. But sometimes I just don't care. Like there's certain things that just doesn't matter to me. And so like, I'm not going to worry myself with it because as an individual fan, as an individual writer, I'm not, it's not, if I don't have the passion for whatever that subject matter is, then I'm not going to look into it. That is not a journalist, and so that's what I mean by not sort of having a journalistic integrity. And so for me, it's more customer service. And that's really my background, like work-wise growing up. It comes down to, I provide a value. You mentioned it earlier. You said it was invaluable. Like that's huge to me because that's the point. Like I wanted to have value to you in some way, whether it's emotional or informational or whatever it is. And so for me, that's kind of what motivates me. And if what I'm doing, for whatever reason I'm doing it, however I'm doing it, if it's providing value to you, that's it. That's all I care about, And so I think that's kind of helped me keep a focus on things. So like if I go to a game or I talk to somebody in the front office or I get to go to spring training or I don't, or I'm home watching with, my buddies, or I'm in the stands with my friends, or I'm in the dugout, or I'm talking to David Wright, or whatever it is. Like, it's always the same thing. It's always the same purpose. I'm always sort of just doing what I'm doing. And so it's not clouded. I don't have necessarily guiding principles necessarily. It's more just the purpose and, the end game, which is that you enjoy it and I enjoy it. And as long as we have that balance, whatever I'm doing, I'm doing. That sounds really simplistic, but I mean, that's the truth.
No, and it's something that, we don't, as journalists, we don't think about the idea of providing value. Like, I feel like that, in some ways that can feel like a dirty word to journalists, speaking as a former reporter. Like, it's the news you can use or the stuff you want to hear. But if you kind of take the step back, it's like a 30,000-foot view of that. It's like, well, no, a journalist, a regular news story should provide value to the reader, to tell you what's going on in the world, what's happening in your community, who, what, where, why, when, all that stuff. And I think that's a really interesting way to kind of look at your work.
Well, I've been saying that for years, that and I have had arguments with reporters about it, where you guys, excuse me, are in the business of customer service. You just don't know it yet. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what social media partly has done. I think it's created the helpline, and you guys, like it or not, you're answering that call. You don't have to, by any means. You don't have to, but in many cases, editors are charging reporters with that responsibility. You got to be active on social. You got to have a Twitter handle. You got to post. And so you're, like it or not, like you're at the front desk, and that's the truth. And you represent your paper, and you represent, more importantly, you and your work. And there is a customer service level responsibility and expectation to that I don't think a lot of people are schooled in. And it's again, like I said, I grew up working at Home Depot and record stores and liquor stores, and I was a bartender, and my dad was a car salesman, and like customer service was a big deal to us. Like, that's just what we did. Like, I still think about it that way. Like, my dad with a clipboard in his hand was magic, when he was just like wandering around in the woods, like, you know what to do. But like, you give him a task and a clipboard, and like customers, like, man, he was on fire. And so like, that's just, I guess it's in our DNA. I never really thought about it until I got older. And now that I watch people interact with fans on Twitter, and some of these reporters are just like egging guys on and being jerks about stuff and trolls or whatever you want to call it. And I'm like, why are you doing this? It doesn't make any sense. Like, why are you making enemies? Or just, the concept never really made sense to me. Like, I would just as soon not respond or just say thank you and move on. Like, and so it's a concept that I think people need to understand a little bit better. and realize the benefit to it, not just to the user, but also to them professionally. I think it's important.
So what's the best thing you've read lately?
Oh, it's a good question. I've been knee deep in, it's funny. I'm people, if you follow me on Twitter, if you're a baseball fan, you follow me on Twitter, and you're annoyed by the fact that I love the TV show Survivor so much.
Okay.
So I've been reading a lot about like television production. I just finished the Martin Short biography, which was terrific. Like I love information, so if I don't read very much fiction at all, I always want to be learning something. I can't sit still. So I've been on like a kind of like an entertainment kick. Anybody that Howard Stern has on his show to talk about and they plug a book, like I end up reading it or listening to the audiobook. So really that stuff, more than anything, in terms of websites and things, just nothing's really been clicking for me lately. I feel like stuff has been really all over the road. Like I'm finding myself gravitating towards a lot of inspirational things. Like that sounds kind of goofy, but those kind of things. And it just, I don't know. The internet itself, this is a separate topic, but reading things on the internet has become really difficult over the last, couple years. Like if you're not using an app that sort of strips out a lot of the BS. The ads and the movement of pay, like it's hard. And so like I find that like I listen to more podcasts. I watch more documentaries. Like I just haven't been reading as much, and that stinks because as a writer, it's important to read other people because it keeps you in check. It opens your mind to other ways of doing things, not just ideas, but technique.
Right.
And so I definitely think I'm missing that. Like I miss it, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely. And get back to the idea of providing value. The websites, and my former employer Gannett is among the worst of it. But with the ads and the tracking and it's just there's no. The customers, my experience as a reader is terrible. Like I will save everything to Instapaper. That's my read later. Pocket is another one. Your mileage may vary on which one you like, but it's just I don't necessarily want to add another layer where I put something in another app and then have to go to that to read. But to try to read something on a lot of these sites is brutal, and there's no I don't understand. I understand why they do it from a business perspective, but still from a long-term kind of value proposition, it doesn't work. Like you're chasing dimes. You're chasing these dimes and turning off a large part of your audience.
Well, it makes me wonder if it's funny if like the book actually like the actual tangible item becomes sort of a place to exploit again, because I do the same thing. I save a ton of things to Instapaper. I email articles. I'm like, I've got hundreds of things that are just ancient because I never get to them. It's impossible to get to everything. And so instead of reading, deep, in-depth, really good, story, whatever, I end up just reading snippets and small articles, and I skim stuff, and I don't even get to a tenth of it. Whereas when I have a book, I find that I'm more likely to, because it's just print in a book.
Right.
I'm not going to get interrupted. I know there's a beginning, middle, and end to it. Like there's a value to the book now that circumvents a lot of the nonsense that goes on online. And so it's just weird how things kind of work around.
Right. And I always find this interesting when I talk to my students, my college students, and they prefer, like almost nobody uses an e-reader for books. Everyone, if they read books, they read actual hard copy books. And I think, there's something to screen fatigue too. If we're on our devices all day, there's something to sitting down with an actual physical printed book, and there's no distraction on it, and there's something to that. There's something kind of ephemeral to that. The book I can recommend, I'm actually holding the hard copy of it right now, is What Made Maddie Run, the new book by Kate Fagan about Maddie, I'm going to get her last name, Madison Holleran. She had written about her on ESPN.com a while back. It was the pen runner who committed suicide, and it's a beautifully written story about kind of it touches on social media and its influence on young generations, on anxiety, on like the rush for college, and there's a lot happening in this book, and it's really, really well done. So I can highly recommend
that's terrific.
That. So
that's terrific.
Matt, if people want to find you and learn about what's going on with the Mets, where can they do that?
For Mets stuff, go to MetsBlog.com. For my media, content
marketing, sports marketing kind of stuff, you can go to MatthewCerrone.com. And you'll find all that kind of good stuff there. And for the book, it's like I said, MatthewCerrone.com/MetsBook. And it's Triumph is the publisher, because if you're a fan of another team, I strongly suggest checking out some of the work the other guys did.
And really quick, do you have a craft beer recommendation for us?
Yeah, anything New England IPA.
New England IPA.
Juicy.
Woo.
Yep, they're incredibly citrusy. You can't see through them. They're bright. It's like drinking. They're very hoppy is not putting it lightly. I mean, it's really, they're more sweet and juicy. They're terrific. Yeah, New England IPAs all the way.
Awesome, Matt. This was great. Thanks so much for joining me.
You got it, Brian. Good luck.